Hello and welcome to Untitled Podcast with Art, a show that looks at art through the lens of pop culture and vice versa. I'm Simon.
I'm Chris.
And today, well, let me start off this way. Chris, how do you feel about the Olympics? What do they mean to you?
I feel so very little about the Olympics. And I feel like this was the first Olympics where I felt like kind of like a freak for not really caring or identifying in any way with the Olympics. I don't know if it was just me or maybe I was imagining it, but it just felt like this Olympics was a bigger deal.
This is the first time you've felt like the Olympics were too big of a deal?
It's the first time I felt left out of the Olympics being a big deal.
Is it because they were in Paris? Is it because... Why was that?
Well, I feel like one of the first Olympics I was really sentient for was the Greece Olympics. And I remember there being a lot of news pieces and stuff about how the Olympics were attendance was really low. Nobody really cared. I do remember the Salt Lake Winter Olympics, people being pretty excited about, which was around the same time. But yeah, that summer Greek Olympics, people were kind of meh about. And this year I feel like, oh, everybody's kind of jazzed about it. And I still have 2,000 feelings about it.
Maybe you just know more Olympic heads than you used to.
Maybe. I do remember
now you have FOMO.
I worked with this woman who was dating this guy and was I was like, oh, what is he into? And she was like, he really likes the Olympics. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I had no idea that was a personality you could choose.
But it is. And then she was like, we're going to the Olympics next year. I was like, you can just go to the Olympics? That's crazy.
They let just any asshole in there.
You can just buy a ticket and go to the Olympics. I had no idea.
Why haven't we gone?
Well, because I don't care. Contrary to what this entire episode is about to suggest, I do not care.
So, Chris, what is this entire episode about?
Well, today we are talking about, let's take the scenic route there. On July 26th, my Mima's birthday, may she rest in wherever she is, heaven, likely, because that's what she believed in. Anyway, on July 26th, the 2024 Paris Olympics opening ceremony sparked controversy due to a particular segment of the nearly 4-hour show that some conservative freaks chose to find offensive. The scene unfolded on a bridge over the River Seine. A diverse group of models, many in drag, very French, sashayed down a catwalk.
I saw your note. Say it.
Très français. Is that how you say it?
I don't know.
Très français.
There you go. Très français.
Très français. Ouais, français. Sashayed down a catwalk while Barbara Butch, a French DJ, spun some sick beats, including saw a rendition of Sandstorm. And toward the end of the performance, drag queen singers and dancers formed a tableau that some viewers likened to Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper and chose to get real mad about.
Okay, before we get too far into this, I just want to go back to the name Barbara Butch, because I had to look it up after I read that to see if that was the real deal.
It's a stage name.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Are we sure that's not what they're mad about?
Well, that is what they're mad about. They're mad that there was a gay, fat, she self-identifies as fat, and a fat activist DJ dared to grace the Olympic opening ceremony with her presence.
She was a better dresser than any of the Bush ladies that I've seen.
Yeah, she fucking rocked it. She looked amazing. She wore that crown real good.
I mean, Laura had some amazing suits in her own way, but
I mean, we've been rewatching The Righteous Gemstones, and I feel like I see so much Barbara Bush fashion in that show.
Do Laura and Barbara dress the same?
What?
Do Laura and Barbara dress the same?
I guess I've kind of merged them as to one super person in my head.
Just a continuum of Bush women?
Yeah, a continuum of Bush men and women.
Yeah.
They're all the same.
They all come out of the same vat?
Yeah, exactly.
Wait.
The same primordial soup.
Yeah.
It is. So Simon, I wanted to ask, how did you first encounter and experience this controversy?
You told me about it, and I said, what controversy?
And I said, figure it out.
We watched the opening ceremony well after the fact because we heard about the controversy.
Like, we watched the opening ceremony 2 days before the closing ceremony.
Do you all know how long the opening ceremony is? It is nearly 4 hours.
I said it earlier. It's 4 hours.
Yeah. I refuse to hear that.
long.
Like, it is no business being that long.
Yeah.
Is there nothing else to put on TV?
I mean, without commercials, probably closer to 3 hours. But yeah, it was long as shit.
Like, even if you're just in the audience there on the side of the river, you're going to sit still for 4 hours? Are they sitting? I don't know.
There were like bleachers. I mean, I imagine they're going to like get wine and smoke a cigarette.
They'll have one long baguette. Never mind.
Anyway,
I need to avoid
just
stupid French
passing it.
jokes in this. Yeah. There's one baguette the length of the entire bleachers that they all just munch on.
row by row.
Anyway, yeah. How long are these things normally? Like when they're in a stadium?
Probably about the
4
same.
hours? People sit in stadium seating for 4 hours?
Yeah, but people do that for baseball and football like every day in America.
But that's America. This is France where they have laws against this sort of thing.
Well, I'm sure they broke for a long lunch.
Okay, yeah. For a long cigarette.
Yeah. So when we watched it, we were specifically like had this episode in mind. We had started thinking like, oh, art's in the mainstream. People are talking about some painting. Who cares what it is? Some unknown painting. And we wanted to get a sense of not just the scenes that had caused controversy, but like, get the full context of the opening ceremony and what was going on there. And I gotta say, I went in with very low expectations and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
It is the longest uninterrupted time we have ever sat and watched Peacock.
Yeah, that is true. And I felt like I hate that I like this so much.
It was fun.
It was fun.
Cool. Gojira was there.
Yeah, Lady Gaga.
Yeah, all sorts of notable French woman, Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. Yeah. So as we're watching this, though, you started kind of getting like fussy. You were getting really impatient. You were like, is this the thing? Is this what everybody's mad about?
Well, I mean, I knew there was controversy to look for. And so, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, except that nothing in there looked like a controversial nail.
Yeah. And so we're watching. We're getting towards the end. We're at like the 3:30 mark or something. And we were kind of like, wait. I feel like that the segment that it should have been ended and then went to a whole new segment. So we started kind of Googling around and realized like that NBC had actually scrubbed the segment, like the controversy from the replay that we were watching on Peacock.
The one featured tile on Peacock. Yeah. Suddenly it was during the whole bridge performance in question. There was also this barge with dancers who are also amazing going down the river and under the bridge. And at a certain point, they just were only cutting to the boat. And I was thinking, this is a lot of boat time. What's going on in the bridge?
Well, and they went back to like doing like that and also just showing the boats with the athletes on them, which like honestly we hadn't seen a lot of since the first hour. And I was like, wait, this also suddenly got really boring again. And now we've cut to a completely different segment where there's this like metal goddess, like metal horse being ridden by Sequana. And we'll come back to that. That's a whole thing.
At a certain point, it was all boats, horse.
Boats. No bridges, just boats. So we had to then go like pirate.
Nope.
No?
I don't know. We went to the dark web.
Yeah.
We had to go to the dark web.
Yes. And bought some crypto, went to the dark web, did a whole Bitcoin exchange on
a lot of work to make it
3
untraceable so we can talk about it on our podcast.
Yeah. And so we found like a French well, it was weird because it was French, but it was English. Like
Was it French?
The broadcaster had a French accent, like the broadcasters who were narrating the whole thing, but they were speaking English.
Yeah. And we knew it wasn't the American broadcast because none of the announcers were nearly as jazzed as they were in the American one.
As Kelly Clarkson was.
Wasn't Kelly Clarkson? Was that Kelly Clarkson?
That was Kelly Clarkson.
You don't mean Kelly Ripa?
No, that wasn't Kelly
Singer
Ripa.
Kelly Clarkson was announcing it?
I would know that it was.
I know it wasn't Kelly Ripa, but I'm prove to me it was Kelly Clarkson.
It was Kelly Clarkson. It was Kelly Clarkson, Peyton Manning, and Mike Tirico, who hosted for NBC Peacock the opening ceremony.
Okay, so Kelly Clarkson was the one who kept going.
She was like the really, and honestly, girl was holding it all together. The two guys were giving her nothing. It was like watching so many first dates I've been on, where it was like talking. Okay, I'm leaving this opening for you. You're not going to take it. I got to keep talking now. Oh my God, this guy's never going to give me a piece.
Either that or she popped some MDMA before the show, which it would have been a rad show to see that way.
Yeah, no, she wasn't loving it that much.
Anyway, we found it on the dark web. We watched it and there was more to it. But before we watched that version of it, I just started writing down every reason I could think that there would be any kind of controversy around the scene that we saw around the scrubbed one. At one point, I thought, are they mad that some lady made a clap at Jesus' dinner party? Was it because of men wearing dresses?
So
was it because that guy was wearing pasties and they put the male nipple back in the cage?
One of them that people were actually mad about was like they thought that they could see some dude's ball.
That was the note that I held up this recording to make sure it got down, because actually the first time I heard about this controversy was actually on Reddit. And it was one of those things where I was like, well, that seems like a whole rabbit hole I could go down, or I could just not poison my mind with this shit. But it was someone saying the controversy was because there was a ball out.
But like I watched it specifically looking for that, and I even saw what they were referencing.
Pixel by pixel.
Some guy had a rip in his tights, which showed like some skin near like his upper thigh, that since the rip was in a rounded shape, you could see that it was like, I could understand why if in a split second you might think that, but if you paused it and just took one more second, it's like, this is not that.
Okay, yeah. So it wasn't Testicle Gate.
No. None of those are, well, okay, so but here's the thing, all of those are the reason why yes, there was controversy, but
I settled that it was because they played Sandstorm.
That's fair.
Which is wrong. They're wrong.
They are wrong. That would be the only thing that they weren't actually mad about.
Good. I mean, not good, but at least Sandstorm is getting the credit it deserves.
Yeah. Love Sandstorm. Is Sandstorm French?
I mean, all those people were professional dancers, it looked like, and they undoubtedly learned how to dance at some point from Dance Dance Revolution, which featured Sandstorm.
It's not French. It was created by a Finnish DJ.
Of course it was.
1999, one of the most iconic trance tracks of all time, and is associated with Finland rather than France. Thanks, ChatGPT.
The first people also ask result on Google is, why is Sandstorm so famous? It's because it was uploaded to mp3.com, where it gained global recognition. It has also gained recognition for usage in sports and popularity in internet meme culture.
I thought it was famous because it was at Skate World all the time.
It was everywhere.
Yeah. So after the ceremony, after this took place, a whole bunch of sentient colonics decided to let it be known.
I'm sorry, what?
They're sentient colonics.
Okay, yeah, let's move on
from that. A whole
bunch
of loser freaks, a whole bunch of fuckers.
Yeah, let's move on.
Came out of the woodwork to compete in the Outrage Olympics. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, decried it as shocking and insulting to Christian people, and later condemned the White House for failing to issue a formal condemnation, and that 200 million Christians in America should take note.
Surprising absolutely everybody.
Yeah. The American Catholic Bishop Robert Barron his real name.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to be an evil fuck.
I know. Definitely don't make your whole name Robert Barron, who hangs out with right-wing freaks like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, called it a gross mockery. And the French Bishops' Conference reportedly shed a tear for the Christians on every continent who have been hurt by the outrageousness and provocation of certain scenes.
Yeah, all I have for that is Robert Barron's really his name.
Yeah.
That guy is, from what I can see, a person in the clergy who puts a lot of energy into being a Twitter personality and like recording statements of himself being outraged.
Yep. Representative Lauren Boebert of Colorado, who was once kicked out of a local musical production of Beetlejuice for disruptive behavior, labeled it disgusting.
I'm the only one who can make people think they saw a ball at a theater production.
Convicted felon, guy who has flown on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express, and former President Donald Trump called it a disgrace. Elon Musk, who makes cars with horns that sound like flatulence and whose own children won't talk to him, called it extremely disrespectful.
I will say that the most interest in those flatulent car sounds that I've seen anecdotally is from French people I know. French boys.
A lot to unpack there. Social media influencer Andrew Tate, who is currently awaiting trial for sex trafficking in Romania, held a protest outside the French embassy, decrying the depiction of the Last Supper.
Wait, hold on. What was his protest like?
It was like 6 people.
Yeah. He's going to get his friends and going to pick
embarrassing.
This is like, when I
He's
was, not to compare my own father to Andrew Tate, but when I was a kid and customer service of some kind would do something that he, in some cases, rightfully deemed an injustice, he would threaten to go get his friends and picket, which you need a lot of friends to pull that off. But I think he had more friends than Andrew Tate did in this case.
Yeah. I think most people have more friends than Andrew Tate. And on August 3rd, over a week later, the Vatican issued a response saying,
"The Holy See was saddened by certain scenes at the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games and cannot but join the voices raised in recent days to deplore the offense done to many Christians and believers of other religions."
So all this outrage, all this controversy by very upstanding people and citizens of the world and institutions that, you know, are definitely without sin, they're all mad. And so I want to take a second to break down this scene more.
Sorry, there's one that I want to make sure that we get in there. One more person who was outraged, also Jenna Ellis. I'll read you the quote, then remind you who Jenna Ellis is if you don't remember yourself. But she said, "In this scene from the Olympic opening ceremony, the famous painting of the Last Supper is recreated. Jesus is replaced with an obese woman, while queer and trans figures, including a child, depict her apostles." Jenna Ellis, Donald Trump's 2020 campaign attorney, wrote on X, formerly Twitter. Jenna Ellis is recently in the news. You might have noticed like 2 weeks ago because she flipped to help prosecutors in the 2020 Arizona election fraud case.
Ooh, a real Judas of our time, huh?
It's perfect, yeah.
Chef's kiss.
Someone's got to do the the 2020-2024 Republican Party. Trump's lawyers, Last Supper. They're all Judas.
But yeah, everyone has their fingers crossed behind their backs or is accepting a little packet of silver.
Giuliani looks like he's already been crucified 5 times.
Yeah. Just bleeding from
his like hair follicles
down his weird chin. So yeah, let's break down this scene. So like we said, we've got the catwalk, there are performances, and then like there's this Assassin's Creed torchbearer who shows up onto the catwalk and does parkour down it.
Yeah, it clearly is meant to evoke the video game franchise style Assassin's Creed where you parkour across different buildings. The publisher is a French company.
It's French, yeah.
Yeah, so this is an iconic French thing. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. The way he or she never put...
Oh, there were like 5 of them in the same costume.
Yeah, inevitably. It's not like they're taking the same people around. It's all different parkour professionals, I'm sure.
You'd get so tired otherwise.
Yeah, I know. And it's high stakes when you're parkouring.
Honest question: how much parkour can one really do in one go?
I have no idea.
What is the record for the most parkour?
Literally never thought about parkour more than like 5 minutes at a time.
This 3.5 hours is the most I ever thought of parkour.
Yeah. So there are some dance and breaking performances. It's a real diverse group putting on this performance. And then 30 performers or it's like 30 or more, I think I counted, gather to one side of the stage, and they're centered behind this large platter covered in a cloche. And the cloche is raised to reveal this very glittery, almost nude, he's got a little like thong or something on, Smurf Blue adult contemporary singer named Philippe Catherine, and he is surrounded on this platter by a rainbow floral arrangement. There's a plate of brie there. He is for some reason adorned with green and red garlands that it almost looks like ornaments, like it's Christmas or something. That part really threw me. I could not figure out the symbolism of that one.
He's looking like a big Smurfy snack.
Yeah, a big like Christmassy, but if Pride was in December and collided with Christmas and Smurf culture.
And we ate our ceremonial roast of a member of the Blue Man Group.
And I want to point out that in this version that we saw, the one that we had to pirate, as the cloche is raised, the French announcer specifically said that this person was representing Dionysus. And the Olympics on July 26th also tweeted that this was the interpretation of the Greek god Dionysus makes us aware of the absurdity of violence between human beings. Hashtag Paris 2024, hashtag opening ceremony. And Katharina is singing something in French about how the world would be a more peaceful place if we were all naked all the time. I don't know all the lyrics.
I mean, it is the scene where the ball was allegedly out, right?
No, it wasn't Katharina whose ball was out. It was this dancer who was wearing they were wearing fishnets, and I think the fishnet layer had a rip in it.
So if you think that rip is one ball, I imagine by that logic, if you saw someone wearing fishnets, you would think they were just covered in testicles.
There's so many balls.
Starting off strong on this episode, got to the nuts
we got
right
to
away.
Balls really fast. Yeah,
way to
good
go.
for us. All right, that's so many episodes of balls.
So I don't think this was the intention, but maybe it being French gives it this kind of edge of sass. But how embarrassing is it to have the IOC tweet you a lesson in Western civilization?
I mean, yeah, I think the whole idea that this was some sort of, it's a mockery of the Last Supper, when literally the notes that all the broadcasters were given, the social media content that was going out right when this scene was happening, is all saying it's Dionysus, the Greek god of merriment and wine and a good time. It's just absurd, but also that's total conspiracy brain shit for you.
Yeah, and aren't the Olympics pagan themselves?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And
okay.
we'll get into that.
Why are you watching at all? If this is a concern.
Yeah, if you don't like ancient Greek homoeroticism, I have bad news for you.
What are you doing here?
Yeah. You might want to find a whole different thing to watch.
Watching this scene when they revealed Katharina, I realized I have no idea what Jesus actually ate for the Last Supper. What's on their plates in that scene?
Bread.
Bread? Okay,
it's
just bread.
The Eucharist.
Oh, right.
Is when at the Last Supper, Jesus serves the Eucharist. So he says, take the bread, it's my body. Take the wine, it's my blood. Blah, 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 blah. And then forever we have toddlers getting drunk at Mass.
Sounds like a shit dinner.
Uh-huh.
Also, that totally kills my theory that they just went to Bennigan's. Which, when I wrote that note down, my autocorrect on my phone made it Benihana, which I like that even more. The Last Supper at Benihana.
Let's make a painting.
A painting? Yeah, it is.
The Last Supper at all sorts of different chain restaurants, at Chili's to go in an airport.
Which one would it be for Trump's 2020 lawyers?
Oh, a Ruth's Chris.
Ruth's Chris, all of them.
Jenna
Michael
Ellis,
Jordan's
Rudy Giuliani,
Steakhouse.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Michael Cohen, all of them just at Ruth's Chris.
Yes. I love this idea. Put a pin in that.
I've never been to a Bennigan's. You tell me it's real.
Bennigan's is delightful. When I was a kid, I wanted to make over my room. I was maybe like in 4th grade or 5th grade. And I wanted to make over my room at my dad's house like a Bennigan's. I was like, I want to get like street signs and like old timey photos and put them all over my room.
Normal thing for kids to do. It really varies by region. Like I really wanted a Red Robin room.
I really want to make my whole room up like a Sherry's or like a Black Bear Diner.
Mine totally would have been Honey Baked Ham, which is just like, can my room be a nursing home, please?
Yeah, like a Panera Bread.
I'm like, give me a mayo dispenser.
Yeah.
Just mayo, shredded iceberg lettuce, ham, and a bunk bed.
I want my to look like the common room of a dormitory.
I mean, yeah, dorms are made to
live in,
but they're exciting rooms for children.
Yeah. Yeah, so much
a room
is
of your
embodied.
Own.
Yeah, the ideas of freedom, and despite the fact that it is okay. Now we're diving deep.
I mean, then the cafeterias are very much just nursing home diners, honey baked hams for hungover.
Are colleges just nursing homes for teenagers?
Yeah.
Yes.
But like they're not dying.
But should we also just make nursing homes like colleges for old people?
What?
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Seems like...
I mean, it's the same thing. They're all like fucking left and right. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. But without protection. Okay. So we figured out a nursing home is a college dorm without the condoms everywhere.
Yeah. Well, now I think that they've caught on, like, you know, people have caught on to the fact that they are fucking left and right, and people are getting like syphilis and stuff. And they are having to do like the same sort of safe sex condom distribution and stuff for nursing homes.
I feel like that education is going to fall on some pretty deaf ears among people who are fucking for the last however many times of their lives.
Yeah, but you don't want like the end of your life to like if cancer is taking you out, you don't want to like syphilis to have the last word.
Can't let the terrorists win.
Right. And the terrorist is Barbara and her VD down in room 304.
We're talking about a lot of Barbaras this episode. You should probably specify which one you mean. Because I thought you meant Barbara Bush.
Barbara B. Anthony.
Can we get sued for slander saying that Barbara Bush is giving everyone in nursing homes VDs?
I didn't say that. Nobody here said that.
Nope, no one said that.
Nobody said that.
No one said that. No one pirated anything. Nobody said Barbara Bush is giving VD to a bunch of senior citizens.
Nobody said that.
We should move on.
I heard she's a nice lady. Married to a war criminal. So.
She has great taste in shoulder pads.
Yeah.
Less so in men.
Yeah. I also just want to point out that the scene right after this, we see this metal horse boat. It's like a Sea-Doo, but it's got a metal horse and a like armored individual metal, kind of the same fabrication as the horse. And the announcers let us know it's Sequana. And Sequana is the daughter of Dionysus. She is the nymph of the springs and the deity of the Seine River. So I just want us to keep that all in mind as we are talking about this further. We have on this bridge, the media is telling us this is Dionysus. And then in the immediate next scene, we see his daughter, who is the goddess of the river that the bridge is spanning.
Looking like she just walked out of a laser tag arena.
Yes. Looking like she's about to go party to some sandstorm.
Laser tag nymph.
Yeah. Well, and then in that she was carrying the torch, right?
Yes.
She had gotten it from the...
Took it from Assassin's Creed.
Yep. So the next day in a press conference, Thomas Jolly, who's the creative director, there was a big press conference just about everything about the opening ceremonies, and a reporter asked him about the controversy, and he was like, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't inspired by the Last Supper, because all these conservative freaks started saying like, it's a mockery of the Last Supper. He says it was Dionysus on the table, and the idea was that we wanted to have a grand pagan festival connected to the gods of Olympus and Olympism. And ever since then, police have been investigating death threats against Jolly, which is just great. Good job, Christians.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Way to really turn the other cheek and not be fanatical freaks about anything ever. Good job.
Is not being an internet troll not included in 10 Commandments?
You know, it's not. I don't. If we're going by an originalism interpretation of the Bible, we're in big trouble, because I feel like an originalism interpretation of the Bible would be like, if Moses could understand it in his time, like we got to interpret the 10 Commandments as Moses would have understood it. So if he didn't understand the internet, then that's on him.
What about trolling?
He
trolled those Egyptians pretty hard.
He did not understand the concept of trolling. Just walking around in his sandals and with his staff, he would have not understood the concept of trolling.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we're
Would he have understood sandstorm?
So I think we're on our own. He would have understood sandstorm, because it's like a musical like version of getting caught in a sandstorm.
I mean, if you had a soundtrack for the parting of the Red Sea,
yeah,
it's sandstorm.
I don't know. I can't do it. But it was really good.
They just had it on loop the entire 40 years they were wandering in the desert afterward.
Yeah.
Just that one song.
That's why everybody started getting really mad at him. Started worshiping a calf.
Can you play anything else?
Any other song. 2 days after the opening ceremony, the Musée Magnin in Dijon, France, published this tweet. Why don't you take a look at that tweet for me? Tell me what you see.
Translated from French by Google. Does this painting remind you of anything? Winky face emoji. What if you came and admired it at #Musée National Magnin in Dijon?
But what do you see in the image?
I see a bunch of details from a painting that is clearly not the Last Supper. Gonna be honest, looks like way more of a party, but no one's probably being killed the next day or betrayed or whatever.
You don't know that.
I don't know that. This freaks into some weird shit. But
let me tell you.
But there is someone on the floor drinking, just squirting wine to their mouth from about a foot over their head. There's someone who looks kind of like Jesus, I guess, playing a harp. There's a little, is that a pootie?
Yes, that is a pootie.
Not a cherub, it's a pootie.
Well, yes, it's a puto.
Pootie's plural? Okay. So it's not a disembodied eyeball with bat wings or whatever.
Yes, not to be confused with the cherub, which is a way scarier image than you think it's going to be. And not to be confused with Cupid, who is a Greek god, but is not a puto. He can take the form, but he is not.
That's all to say, this little dude looks like what you think of when you think of a cherub. It's a little, like a child or a baby with angel wings.
Yeah.
The whole thing looks like it's the same kind of framing as the Last Supper, where there's a long table. Most people are on one side of it. They're all doing their own thing, having their own conversations, and there's some people drunk dancing half naked in the foreground.
This tweet is referencing the painting The Feast of the Gods by Jan van Bijlert from 1635. He was a Dutch painter, and this painting is on display at the Musée Magnin and is owned by the French government. So it makes it a little bit more of an obvious choice for the French opening of the Olympic Games than the Last Supper, which was created by some Italian guy.
And this is some Italian guy.
Some nobody.
A number of people on Twitter pointed this out, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I've seen art historians back this up. It is unclear if Jolly took direct inspiration from this image, but much like the Last Supper, it is a scene that has been depicted hundreds of times throughout art history. So even if this wasn't like the actual painting that he is referencing spot on, then the idea of this painting is still probably one that he took inspiration from.
It does resemble it pretty closely. I mean,
it does.
This is way more of a party. Like, no one looks like they're gonna be killed by the state the next day.
Right. So, well, what we're seeing here, I mean, like you pointed out, you've got the long banquet table. You've got like mostly people are on one side, but not everyone. In the foreground, we see Dionysus. And Dionysus, for anybody who doesn't know, is the Greek name for the Roman god Bacchus. And you might recognize that as the root word of bacchanalia, or a big sexy party. And so it makes sense that this opening ceremony would be depicting a Greek bacchanalia and not the Last Supper.
And that's the kind of party where, not that this was the case, but had it been the case that there was a ball out, it would have been okay, and assuredly not the only ball.
Yeah, one ball at a bacchanalia is a very unsatisfactory number of balls.
One ball and a pair of legs covered in testicles.
Yeah, I guess, well, that, I think you need to go to a doctor if that's what's happening. But yeah, I mean, as long as there's like a healthy number of balls, then like we've got a bacchanalia.
It's like, what's the number like that makes something, like an orgy versus a threesome or foursome? What number makes it a bacchanalia? How many balls make a bacchanalia?
And like, so bacchanalia could mean, how you have like a murder of crows and a pot of dolphins. Bacchanalia is like a certain number of balls.
What number?
12.
Okay.
Why not?
Definitive.
Number of apostles.
Yeah.
Minus Jesus. We don't.
Yeah. Well, we should talk at some point about the calculations that happen with the Last Supper.
More math. This is a math podcast about pop culture and art.
No one's fooled by us. And also, we don't do any real math on this.
I do so much math every day. I do more than I thought I would when I went to art school.
TV and film and media in general love to reference the Last Supper. It's been around for a long time, but
the little known painting.
I don't really remember reading the Da Vinci Code. I remember there being like a lot of math and conspiracy stuff and Illuminati stuff. But here's a Simpsons episode where Homer sees what is supposed to be like the Left Behind, promoting Christianity, rapture, disaster movies. And he gets really into being a street corner preacher. And the way he predicts the rapture is by counting the number of people in the Last Supper and doing some math around it. But he gets it wrong because he didn't count Jesus. And that's the real time that it's going to happen.
It's unclear if he actually gets raptured, right? Like, it's a dream, but maybe it's not a dream.
It's The Simpsons.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people pointed out that the performance looked a lot more like the Feast of the Gods than the Last Supper.
Yeah.
One of the things that was pointed out was that there are at least 17 Olympic performers compared to the 12 apostles, which this is the same mistake Homer Simpson made.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that number 17, but I counted them. It was 30 or more. There were some areas of the image where I was like, is that somebody's head or is that like a shadow or something? But I came out with the number 30, so that is a lot more. That
really throws off the doomsday calculation. It could be any day now for that. That episode came out in 2005. It could be, if there were 30 people in that painting.
If anybody is good at math, please get on making these calculations and let me know.
Yeah, let us know when the rapture is coming. Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. With this image, there's actually like 20 figures in just this half of the painting. And the reason I say this half of the painting is because only the right half of the painting survives to this day. The left half has been totally lost. No idea where it is. Probably in some rich guy's bunker. He's just like holding off on producing it until he can sell it for like the most money ever. But that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, let's be real. It's in Switzerland.
It's in Switzerland.
Not legally
somewhere.
Switzerland, but it's geographically in Switzerland.
It's in the idea of Switzerland. And so in the foreground, we can also see a figure known as a satyr. And satyr were the party bros of Bacchus. They are these male nature spirits who also loved wine, music, dancing, and women, much like Bacchus. They have the little ears and the tails of a horsey and a permanent erection. And sadly, you cannot see the permanent erection in this painting because of some Hollywood level obfuscation obfuscation happening with the angle of the body. And sorry to anybody who might be disappointed, but that's also why that figure on the left, the guy wearing armor, is kind of cut in half.
To hide his erection?
No, it's the half of the painting. Oh, yeah. Okay. To hide his... They strategically
cut it right.
To hide his like backward facing erection.
On the axis of erections.
Yeah. But yeah, so Bacchus, Dionysus, I'll probably keep calling him Dionysus just because that's like the name which we're operating under for like this Olympic depiction. He's the god of winemaking, orchards and fruit, vegetation, fertility, festivity, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, and theater. And this painting depicts the marriage of the god Thetis, a young sea nymph, and Peleus, the king of Phthia. What we're seeing is maybe the idea of a bacchanalia, but bacchanalia didn't really become a thing. You know, bacchanalia was created by the cult of Dionysus to worship Dionysus. They actually started out as a women's only kind of thing.
Oh.
And eventually they did begin to involve men.
Wait, do satyrs count?
Well, I don't know.
We've got erections forever. Only women allowed.
Yeah. And then I think eventually there was like a quota on the bacchanalia. But then those quotas were actually imposed by the Roman government who were like, we can't have a whole bunch of women getting together and like partying together with no men. So now for like we have to have a certain number of men and stuff like that.
So it's the opposite of those college parties at frats or whatever, where if you're going to get in as a dude, you got to bring chicks.
I mean, it's actually the exact same concept.
I mean, all these super hard right-wing dudes in the government really seem like they didn't go to any parties in high school or in college. They seem like those speech and debate kids who just, instead of learning from being bullied, just became vindictive, became bullies themselves. But you would think that they would respond well to this history where frat parties essentially were born. It seems like Brett Kavanaugh seems like he's all about this.
But so many of them are also the kind of people who are not invited to frat parties and want to be, therefore, in charge of the frat parties.
Right, yeah. And then they go on TV and cry about how much they love beer and then join the Supreme Court. I'm going off on a tangent. Let's go on.
So in addition to like their college experience not including like a lot of parties, it also did include a lot of art history. And so these people know like 3 paintings, and that is why we're here.
Oh, what? You cut art lit from the curriculum?
And now every time you see people in a tableau, you think it's the Last Supper? Oh, no.
I'm triggered every time I see people sitting on one side of a table.
Yeah, every sitcom. I'm just like, damn.
Every play.
Yeah. Every time somebody has to hit a mark.
Weddings love to recreate the Last Supper. What's up with that?
Yeah. Well, and it's a mockery. And I will explain why. Basically, like, you know the Last Supper. Everybody knows the Last Supper. It's why we're here, because people know 3 paintings. The Mona Lisa, the Last Supper, Starry Night, and they are otherwise incapable of making deeper artistic connections.
What about Thomas Kinkade?
Who are you talking about?
Mall painter Thomas Kinkade, master of light.
Never heard of him.
I know that's not true.
I know. Whoa, dogs playing poker.
Yeah,
no, that's not Thomas Kinkade. I'm just saying that's
Thomas Kinkade did that one?
No, but I'm saying that's like the 4th famous painting, dogs playing poker. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this version of the Last Supper. Like, we know Jesus is in the middle there. He has just told the 12 apostles that one of them is going to betray him. And we're seeing their immediate reaction to this news. Note, though, 12 apostles plus 1 Jesus equals 13 people compared to the 30 plus people we see in that opening Olympic scene. It was completed in 1498. And it's a mural in the Santa Maria della Grazia, Milan, Italy. And what I really want to talk about, since we all know this painting, is that Leonardo da Vinci was queer as fuck. And
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I had heard little...
Doesn't seem like any of my business.
It It's not anybody's business. However, it is a little bit of our business because there has been this whitewashing and hetero washing of his legacy. We don't think about him as anything more than this incredible inventor, painter, artist, Renaissance man, the quintessential Renaissance man. And to take away his queerness is a really kind of sad thing about his legacy, because in his diaries, he writes, at this time, being out was not possible. The first time he was publicly, or I guess not publicly because it was anonymously, he was anonymously accused of what do you call butt sex? Sodomy. He was anonymously accused of sodomy with an around town male sex worker, along with some other townspeople, and eventually the charges were dropped. And then he actually had more accusations against him again. Charges were dropped again. But it was a big part of his life. And I'm going to quote from Walter Isaacson's biography on Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was romantically and sexually attracted to men, and unlike Michelangelo, Burn, seemed to be just fine with that. He made no effort to either hide or proclaim it, but it probably contributed to his sense of being unconventional. He goes on, over the years, he would have many beautiful young men as a part of his studio and household. And I think the thing about, he made no effort to hide or proclaim it. He would make little insinuations and things like that in his diaries. He was a prolific diarist. The reason we know so much about him is because of his diaries. And he would make insinuations, but he also wasn't an idiot about it. He didn't go around flaunting it, but he was really into dressing up, kind of flirting with the line of cross-dressing and things like that.
He knew how to cultivate mystique.
Yes. He was also kind of the OG gay dude who acts repulsed by vaginas as a bit. I just want to say this quote. Leonardo was never known to have had a relationship with a woman, and he occasionally recorded his distaste for the idea of heterosexual copulation. He wrote in one of his notebooks, the sexual act of coitus and the body parts employed for it are so repulsive that if it were not for the beauty of the faces and the adornment of the actors for the pent-up impulse, nature would lose the human species. Well, and a lot of his subjects are men. I mean, I know Mona Lisa is, one of his most famous works, but that's actually compared to the number of men he painted and the models he used in his studio were always men. And that's how he liked it. But then the men still have this very feminine quality. I hear this idea of the Mona Lisa, maybe it was a self-portrait. And I think that goes a little far. It's a commission of a rich, noble person, but he did like to gender bend and things in it. He liked to imbue his subjects with both a masculine and feminine energy because he was gender bendy and he liked to play with those lines. And that's what I'm trying to get to. I think a lot of text has been spent on disproving or proving that this Olympics scene was the Last Supper, and therefore it is a mockery. And I want to say, why is it a mockery?
Because Mike Johnson is afraid of trans people.
Well, yeah, and it's because you inherently believe that LGBTQ people, fat people, disabled people, Black people, people of color are not made in the image of Christ. And you do not believe that they, and you believe if they are portraying a scene, that therefore their very existence makes that a mockery of that scene.
Right.
And so I want to look at some alternative images of the Last Supper from art history. Because while pretty much everybody knows and has seen the image of Da Vinci's Last Supper, like the Last Supper has been painted and depicted hundreds of times in frescoes, in mosaics, in paintings, in tapestry. We have seen the Last Supper depicted time and time again. So I want to look at the Last Supper by Jacopo Tintoretto, circa 1594. So this one is 100 years after Da Vinci's Last Supper. And I love this Last Supper. This Last Supper fucking rocks.
Looks like a metal album cover compared to the Da Vinci one.
Yeah. Can you tell me what you see here?
It is not just straight on, not just a straight on, like, image
linear
of linear
perspective. Yeah.
Which we called that in my newspaper class in high school. When you're taking photos of people, do not take the photo that is what they call the execution at dawn, which is don't put them up against the wall and make them look at the camera. Though, I guess it's fitting for Jesus' betrayal. Anyway, this one it's taken at an angle. There's a clear form, middle, and background. It's in a dark hall that is, well, this one's clearly at night, right? It's lit with torches. There's a source of light behind the table. There's these not literal halos. One of them has them. But there's
that's
a halation.
That's going to be Jesus.
Okay,
you
Jesus.
can see him in his crimson robe, but with the royal blue indigo robe as well. And he's got the halo.
And then there are these kind of ghostly clouds of what I'm going to assume are angels or
They're
something.
Angels,
okay,
that's correct.
The whole thing feels much more like it's a lot more chiaroscuro. There's a lot of dark. There's a lot of light.
Yeah.
You can see that it's been a couple of 100 years since Da Vinci's painting.
It was pretty much 100 years, yeah. What I love about this version is that there are women in it. You always wonder, how'd they get that food? How'd they get that wine?
I mean, it's a bacchanalia. They gotta bring some ladies with them.
You think 12 men are gonna figure out how to get the food for themselves? 13 men, I guess, counting Jesus? No way. You can see the women are doing the work here. They are serving, they are washing dishes. There are also men who are doing the same work of serving. And yeah, I love this piece. There's so much movement.
I know it looks like they're eating bread in the Da Vinci painting, but if it's all dudes, they're eating Hot Pockets.
Yeah. I mean, I always just assumed somebody's mom did it.
Jesus' mom made them all Hot Pockets.
You know what? I guess maybe these are somebody's mom.
One of the other paintings, Last Supper with bagel bites.
Incredible. Yeah, also like a DiGiorno pizza. Uncrustables.
It's that really controversial 1990s DiGiorno commercial that was the Last Supper. Not delivery. Deliver us from sin with DiGiorno.
Deliver us from evil with DiGiorno. So I think one of the really common things to people, it's always why are they sitting on one side of the table? That's such a common pop culture thing. And, in this version, they are still all on the same side of the table. But in that same sort of way with the Feast of the Gods image, you see people on the other side of the table and you're looking at it from a different angle, which is really fun. I really love this version. I think it's really beautiful. I love all the sources of the light. Jesus has the big halo, but all of the apostles do have halos, except for that one figure on the very end. And who do you think that figure is that's leaning over and doesn't have a seat at the table?
Is it Rudy Giuliani?
Ding, ding, ding.
It's Judas.
It's Judas. So I also want to look at this other version. So it's the Last Supper, but it's actually called The Feast in the House of Levi by Paolo Veronese, completed in 1573.
How big is this piece, do you know?
Large.
It looks real big.
It's a biggie. And the reason, and it's huge, it actually, with Da Vinci's Last Supper, we have linear perspective and one vanishing point. This piece has 3 different vanishing points, left, right, and center, because Veronese was imagining if you're on the right side of the room, you want your vanishing point to be on the right, if you're on the left, and so on and so forth.
Who said art couldn't have math?
Yeah.
Certainly not us.
No, I love math and doing it and doing good at it.
Doing a bunch of math before you make art to find the vanishing point.
Yeah. And this piece to me, it's very visually interesting. Again, like that Feast of the Gods piece, we see this banquet table, but we see people on both sides of it. A lot of the figures are on the other side of this long banquet table facing the viewer, but you do have people forward. And I want to talk about why that is.
There are also children in this piece at this banquet, which I want to point this out because you have, the Feast of the Gods with those, what is it, Pudi? At least one Pudo.
A Pudo. Italian Pudo. The Latin for pudus means little man.
Pudus?
Pudus. Isn't it so silly?
I don't have a son, but if I did, Pudus. Name him Pudus.
Pudus, come here.
You have to give your text a stink to it. Pudus.
Yeah. Pudus. Put that down.
Micah. Pudus. Anyway, I think it's an important point for what we're talking about with the Olympic outrage that there are children in this, because Jenna Kelly, is that her stupid name?
Yeah, a lot of right-wing freaks were like, there were children there.
There were trans people next to children. There were drag queens next to children. And
it's just...
they involved children in their mockery of Christ. This boring-ass sad dinner that had only men between the ages of 28 and 37 eating bread. And no women were there. No children were there. There's children in this depiction. It looks like a banquet.
Well,
people have kids around. It's a Bennigan's.
There are children. There are also dwarfs and drunk Germans. We're going to come back to that.
Hold on. Why are drunk Germans in that category?
We're going to come back to this.
Is there a physiological reason you included drunk Germans with dwarves and children?
I guess I'm not sure what the difference is between... I know that there are both dwarves and drunk Germans in this, but I do not know who is who.
Would you say there are drunk Italians in this?
I do not know. I only know of the Germans.
Are there drunk Israelites in
this?
There's
also dogs.
Why?
Oh, doggy.
Why did you single out Germans?
I did not single out Germans. The Spanish Inquisition singled out the Germans.
Okay.
If you just let me explain.
Okay, yeah, you can explain. On behalf of all the drunk Germans, I am tweeting right now about the outrage of you saying they look like children.
I did not do this. The Spanish Inquisition did this. Do the Monty Python.
Well, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
There you go. I couldn't remember it. So
our three tools are drunk Germans, dwarves, children. I don't know. Go on.
So this piece was supposed to be The Last Supper, but according to David Rostand, in painting in the 16th century Venice, Veronese went and got himself Spanish Inquisition and had to explain why this holy work contained, quote, buffoons, drunken Germans, dwarves, and other scurrilities. And that is from the transcript of the trial of Veronese, as well as extravagant costumes and settings. He was told he had 3 months to change the work. Instead, he just changed the title to The Feast in the House of Levi. And I guess everyone was cool with this being the solution because according to the Gospel of Luke, that scene was supposed to feature sinners, whereas like the scene of the Last Supper was not. But I mean, there was Judas who was, sinners were like, what isn't the whole point of Christianity? Everyone's a sinner. I don't know. I'm confused about the whole thing. But
we're all born drunk Germans.
Yeah. And to quote Luke 5:29 through 32, and Levi made him a great feast in his own house, and there was a great company of publicans and others that sat down with them. But their scribes and Pharisees murmured against his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with publicans and sinners? And Jesus answered, saying unto them, they are a whole... God, Jesus talked fucked up. They that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick, I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. And so the reason I really like this one is, one, the drunken Germans. Just great. There's doggies.
Not nearly enough drunken Germans throughout history.
And there's so much action and movement. It's a huge piece with so many people. We're seeing...
They brought the party.
Yeah, they brought the party. It kind of feels like Bacchus was an organizer. You can feel Dionysus' spirit here. And to quote from a piece by Emma Cieslik in Hyperallergic called "The Olympics Drag Scene Got Christian Art History Right."
Critics who incorrectly claim that the drag performers were imitating the Last Supper are reinforcing Christian hegemony or the supremacy of Christianity as a framework of social, political, and spiritual life. The fact that they immediately identified the performance, featuring a semi-nude blue Bacchus, the Roman god of wine and merriment, as their religion's most famous feast, speaks to their own limited understanding of art history. Christian art is, in fact, deeply rooted in pagan iconography.
She goes on to say, quote,
"These same early Christian artists borrowed naturalist pagan symbols, such as fish, doves, olive branches, and lambs, that have now become central to Christianity. Last Friday's ceremony did not co-opt anything Christian, because none of it belonged to Christianity in the first place."
That's why I want to draw this all back to the reason these images resemble the Feast of the Gods and they're all borrowing from each other is because at this time, they're all intermixed. All of this style, all of these images, they're being created by Christians and non-Christians for Christian churches, for secular or the cults of different gods. And they are all in conversation with each other. I will also just want to say, worth checking out the full essay. There is so much we could not get into on this episode. We've already been recording forever. I really had to scale back on the research. There was so much I wanted to talk about. There were so many different depictions of the Feast of the Gods that I wanted to talk about. There's so many more depictions of the Last Supper that I want to talk about. Unfortunately, we're just not going to get there because then this entire podcast would just become 13 years of only talking about that subject matter.
One for each apostle plus Jesus.
Uh-huh.
It means something.
You do the math. So that's why I just wanted to talk about this particular depiction and, created just about 75 plus years after Da Vinci's was completed, but definitely harkens back to that pagan Christian iconography that it was all swirling around in the same big pot of art history stew.
I just can't believe that cynical right-wing Congress people have not done their homework on art history.
And I think it's important to circle back. These people are dishonest. They are not sincere. They are bad actors. They do not believe the things that they say. They just have found their scapegoats through LGBTQ people, through women, through fat people, through disabled people.
Anyone who lacks power at any given epoch in history.
And they are using those people to shore up their own power. And none of them actually mean a single thing they say. They saw this, their little brains went, tableau, looks like Jesus, Last Supper. I know 3 paintings. I know Last Supper. Mockery. I will write a tweet about this. And that's as far as it goes.
This is going to drive hella engagement.
Hell yeah. They love engagement.
So when you were quoting Luke 5:29-32, there's a line in there that jumped out at me because there is another artist who drew this exact connection when he says, Jesus answered by saying unto them, they that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So are you familiar with David LaChapelle's work at all?
I don't know.
He is, I would say, best known as a kind of fashion lifestyle photographer who's also prominent in the modern art scene. He's got connections to Warhol. He was hired at a young age by Warhol as a photographer for Interview magazine. He's probably most notable in our lifetime for the Diesel gay sailor ad from 1995. Diesel clothing, Diesel jeans. In 1995, LaChapelle shot a famous kissing sailors advertisement for Diesel. It was staged at the peace celebration of World War II, and it became one of the first public advertisements showing a gay or lesbian couple kissing. A lot of controversy because it was the 90s and it was being published at the height of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which, in the US was when the US government banned openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual people from military service, saying
they said you could be gay,
you just can't talk about it. You just can't
it.
express yourself in any way or tell anyone who you are.
Yes.
LaChapelle is interesting here because he's done this series where it's based on those t-shirts that were like, Jesus is my homeboy. Do you remember those at all?
I do.
Yeah.
I don't think I had one, but I also may have had one. I was a youth group teen.
So LaChapelle did a series called Jesus is my homeboy because he said he saw this shirt and thought about what does that actually mean. It gets back to that Luke line.
That Luke quick hit,
yeah. This is an artist who was known for that hybrid of high fashion, but also street photography. He did this series of photos in 2003 that were all these scenes from the New Testament of Jesus looking like Jesus in robes with light behind him and long hair and being white, etc. The way that, a lot of traditional Christians in the US would imagine him. But then he's surrounded by people you'd expect to see on the street in 2003. Like people look like they might be in gangs, people who look like they're sex workers. Most of them aren't white, which was the artist's way of saying, if the message is acceptance, who would be the contemporary analog of Jesus' apostles today, right? It's not people like fucking Mike Johnson. It is people that he has met at the transit centers, people who are hard on their luck, people who have hard lives.
Yep.
He did this whole series around that, and there is one at the Last Supper, which I'm going to send you this link.
So in this image, I see, it's kind of a small room. At the center, you very clearly see what is a figure who you would immediately recognize as Jesus. He's wearing a crimson tunic, an indigo, like royal blue sash, long hair. Can't tell if he has a beard or if that's just a shadow. Above him, there's a little cross being illuminated in his halo.
It's a scanty beard.
Yeah. Oh, scanty beard. Uh-oh. Does he have a Sugarloaf-shaped skull?
I mean, by the concept of the series, he probably would have a mugshot.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, every single one of these apostles probably has a mugshot.
For those wondering what we're talking about, go back and listen to our last episode.
You gotta listen to that one.
About mugshots.
Yeah. I love the detail of like that oilcloth tablecloth. That is like the quintessential sort of, you would see it at a fabric store that exists in a like predominantly Mexican American neighborhood where it's like you can buy this and then you'll see it at picnics and stuff.
It's royal blue vinyl with
like a
flowers
floral
on it.
Pattern, like these really saturated floral patterns. And then, you see predominantly surrounded by people of color. You do see a woman who I assume is supposed to represent a Mary Magdalene type character or figure in this particular rendition. So going like, that Dan Brown conspiracy route of Mary Magdalene was at the Last Supper. I also love the detail of the little foot basin here of like washing feet and that's there too. And also just all sorts of different boozes.
It's also the size of the room. It's tiny. They're all packed in this little room.
Tiny room.
It's lit overhead with like halogen.
Like
lit overhead with fluorescent or incandescent light bulbs.
Yeah, incandescent is probably more correct.
It feels like someone's dining room in their house and there's family and friends all just crammed into this small space that was meant to hold maybe 4 people.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, I think this message would be entirely lost on so many Christians today.
Well, no, they're not all wearing suits, not all shaven, they're all white.
But yeah, it is a very evocative, powerful image because I think, so personally, I grew up Southern Baptist. I think I technically am still Southern Baptist. If you Google my name, which you will not find out, I am still on the rolls of like the Southern Baptist church I grew up in. And I think they wish me a happy birthday every single year. And scarred the shit out of me. But, something I took from it is that you were supposed to love the sinner. And you're supposed to love the sinner more than you loved the saved, because the sinner was the one who needed love. And
do you blame the sinner for being a sinner?
No, you can't blame the sinner. And you can't blame the sinner for having really bad tattoos. You mentioned that David LaChapelle worked with Andy Warhol, and it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast if somehow we did not talk about Andy Warhol.
2 things remain constant across our episodes that we can count on one hand.
Math.
3 things remain constant. Math, balls,
and Andy Warhol. I think we should just rename this podcast Math, Balls, and Andy Warhol.
That's our description.
Yeah. The guy was prolific. It's not my fault. It's actually really funny. I think I didn't even like Andy Warhol's work like that much before we started this podcast. I knew of him. I knew of his work, and obviously had engaged with it on some level, had read some books that went into depth about some of his work. But this podcast is just everything I'm Googling is when I'm looking for references. It's Andy Warhol did this. And then I learned more about him and I like him a little more. So
he's more than just Kansas soup.
He is more than Kansas soup and Brillo Pats. That is true. So Andy Warhol did this work called 60 Last Suppers. And I put that image there. Can you describe that image?
It looks like a gallery or museum white wall with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It's 60.
Oh, yeah. You told me it was 60.
It says it in
this
the title.
This podcast is math in the title.
Yeah.
It doesn't have listening in the title. But yeah, it looks like a photocopy of The Last Supper, but then photocopy of a photocopy 60 times put in a grid.
Yeah, it looks like it's been Xeroxed, and it's screen printed. And I didn't need to include the picture that I included right below it, but I just love this picture of Andy Warhol. He's standing in front of a larger version of one of his Last Suppers. I found it and I was like, if I was a lesbian and he was a lady and we were in Portland in the 90s, I would want to date him.
Why does he have to be a lady?
He's so cute.
I just like his glasses. I feel I always ask to get bigger glasses, and then I try them on online with that AR thing. I'm like, oh, cool, those look good on me. Those are big glasses. Then I get them, and I think my face is gigantic. These glasses are tiny on me.
Yeah. I love his style. I love his haircut. He looks so good here. And this was actually towards the end of his life. He was a lifelong practicing Catholic, and he painted at this time more than 100 images directly inspired by and borrowed from Da Vinci's Last Supper. He started this work shortly after the death of his partner, John Gould, who died of AIDS, and then shortly before his own death due to complications from surgery. When I first approached this work, I was like, I feel like this is how I so often approach so much of Warhol's work, because I feel like he has this very similar vibe going as Balloon Dog Man Coons, who he says it's not about anything. It's fine. But through interviews and his diaries, we learn there was so much more going on than that. And in this image that you can see below the one that Warhol is in, The Last Supper, Big C, you see this image of the motorcycle, these Christly images, this $6.99. And I'm going to read a little bit from an essay titled Warhol's Confession, Love, Faith, and AIDS by Jessica Beck. Quote, the tension between Warhol's sexuality and his religious life has its fullest expression in paintings such as The Last Supper, the Big C, in which signs and symbols create a private reference to AIDS. She goes on to explain, on this canvas, the figure of Christ recurs 4 times, while hands appear repeatedly. Thomas's finger points to the sky, intimating that heaven knows he is free of guilt, appears prominently next to the eye in the Wise Potato Chip logo. Given the direct references to gay cancer in Warhol's diaries, it becomes clear that this image of Christ was connected for him to the rapid rate at which people around him were dying. The big C was synonymous with AIDS. The Last Supper, the big C, reflects on sex and shame through the appropriated images of Christ's betrayal, the piercing owl's eyes, the Wise logo, and the numbers 699 appropriated from a price tag, $6.99, but indexing both the sexual position, 69, and the mark of the beast, 666, in the book of Revelations. The breaking down of the work here in a way that I think like Warhol, being a lifelong practicing Catholic, was never ready to publicly admit by this curator and writer is so fascinating to me, because then, you know, I really start to see the parallels between like him and Da Vinci. They both had to very much hide a lot of who they were and walk this fine line between the church and their selves.
Help me understand these pieces. There's these 60 Last Suppers. Separately are 100 images that he painted himself of the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Right. What's the 60 Last Suppers about? Like, why the photocopies?
I mean, I'm less clear about the reproduction other than that was Warhol's whole thing. You know, the reproduction, the mass reproduction of imagery and the appropriation of specifically this religious imagery that presumably as a Catholic would have been very meaningful to him. And so then that begs the question, if a lifelong practicing Catholic such as Warhol is appropriating these images, is that a mockery? Is that a celebration? He did not publicly admit he was a Catholic. He was in a lot of ways more ashamed of being Catholic publicly than he ever was of being gay.
There's this idea that people are doing this to make a mockery of Christianity. The entire section of the Paris Olympics opening ceremony was just there to laugh at Christians. Most people who are making art aren't going out of their way to mock religions.
No, it's
like you
very
can, but it's not. It doesn't make for interesting art.
Yeah, I think mocking as an artist, like mocking things is so boring.
There's like satire. Yeah. There's humor. David LaChapelle got a lot of heat for, you know, the tone of his images with especially that Kissing Sailors ad.
Mm-hmm.
The point isn't to mock. The point is to have a conversation about something.
Yeah, the point is to maybe in some instances be subversive. But subversion is not mockery.
And that's not necessarily at odds with the Catholic Church or with any Christian church either.
It's not at odds with somebody's faith or lack of faith either.
I mean, as recent as last year, Pope Francis had a bunch of artists to the Sistine Chapel to reconnect the Roman Catholic Church with artists, saying he wants to enlist artists to act as catalysts for change in areas like social justice, which, you know, that's a different reason for why the arts were so heavily featured hundreds of years ago with the Roman Catholic Church, but he's trying to make that connection again. One of the artists invited to that was Andres Serrano. Andres Serrano is, well, relevant to this episode. His most famous piece is probably Immersion, parentheses, Piss Christ.
Piss Christ!
Chris, what do you know about Piss Christ?
I don't know that much.
So,
but I like the name.
Piss Christ, or Immersion, let's call it by its name. Immersion Piss Christ. It's commonly known as Piss Christ. It's from 1987.
I thought there was a chance he was also that guy who made a sculpture of like a human head out of poop. And
what?
I don't know. I saw it in Germany, of course. Oh, there it is.
We made this whole
shithead, March 1997.
All right, some also might be there to mock something.
To a like balloon dog satire piece. No, it's not real. It's like the satire piece of a balloon dog taking a shit.
It's starting to sound like a Danny McDonald piece.
Things are getting complicated.
Immersion, Piss Christ.
I see a image that is predominantly red, and the central figure in it's kind of like yellowish red. I see a cross, and I see a figure being crucified. Yeah, fair to assume we're looking at Jesus.
Yeah, it's a photograph. It's a plastic, a mass-produced crucifix with Jesus on it, submerged in a small glass tank of the artist's urine.
Okay.
Seems like
it's Where does the pee-pee come in?
Well, let me tell you where the pee-pee comes in.
Okay.
So I will say that this piece, as you might expect, got a lot of heat. There's a lot of controversy around it. It was called blasphemous. When you look up blasphemy in art, this is one of the examples that you will see from the modern era.
Uh-huh.
His response to it being blasphemy is, I don't think this is a joke, but it kind of feels like one, where he pretty much says, what are you talking about? I'm a Catholic.
Can't be blasphemous. I'm a Catholic. We invented blasphemy.
He's not being that tongue-in-cheek about it. He didn't ascribe an overtly political context to Piss Christ and the artworks he did around the same theme. The point was the ambiguity. He said that this work was not intended to denounce religion. It alludes to the recent trend of commercializing and cheapening Christian icons in contemporary culture. He's also explicitly rejected the assertion that he was motivated by blasphemy but he said this was intended, and to your question about where the piss come from, Serrano said this work was intended as a serious work of Christian art. He said, quote,
"What it symbolizes is the way Christ died. The blood came out of him, but so did the piss and the shit. Maybe if Piss Christ upsets you, it's because it gives some sense of what the crucifixion actually was like. I was born and raised a Catholic, and I've been a Christian all my life."
I like the idea. I like that idea because even as brutal as Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ was, we still didn't see a lot of piss and shit.
There was no piss. There was no shit. And that's why I gave it 2 stars. I reviewed it on Letterboxd.
Yeah. 0 piss, 0 shit. 2 stars. I think that this idea of the commercialization or cheapening of Christian icons is interesting because that relates to me back to our discussion of Katharina Fritsch on episode 2 and part 2 of the Broad City episode, where we talked about Madonna figure.
But the one that looked like it was
butter.
It's the butter Madonna made from a plastic Madonna.
It's not made of butter.
It looks like butter.
It looks like it's made
Anyone
of butter,
say it was
but
butter?
it is not.
It's supposed to look like butter.
It's not supposed to look.
It just looks like butter.
It just does.
I will never get this through my head.
Yeah. What part of this don't you understand? It is not butter.
You can't. It's a sculpture, not a photo, right?
It's a sculpture.
You can't ever let me near it because I'm going to try to spread it on toast.
We can never go to MoMA again.
Nope, it's over.
All right.
What's in your pocket, Simon? Is that a butter knife?
You can't.
Is that a slice of bread? Security?
It's okay. It's okay. It's just French.
So back to the, speaking of the Christ's piss and shit and just bodily fluids in general, and Serrano talking about them. In terms of scope of controversy around this, Serrano actually lost National Endowment for the Arts funding because of this piece.
Dang.
So,
what wieners?
An article by Tori Campbell in Artland magazine says, as the NEA is an American government agency that offers financial funding for artistic projects, Serrano ended up receiving backlash in 1989, 2 years after he made the piece, from United States Senators Al D'Amato and Jesse Helm, for receiving money from the taxpayer-funded government organization. The senators ended up successfully passing a law that required the NEA to consider, quote, general standards of decency, end quote, in subsequent grant awards. Other protesters asserted that the NEA award violated the separation of church and state, and a large-scale debate on provocative artworks was born. The attention also resulted in a barrage of hate mail, death threats, and loss of grants for Serrano, while the NEA budget was slashed by 2/5. So, it gives you some context as to why it was important that Pope Francis invited, among the other artists, Andres Serrano in 2023 to the Sistine Chapel to reconnect the church with artists. In the New York Times piece about this, it says, Francis blessed Mr. Serrano and gave him a cheery thumbs up. Serrano said, I was surprised to be invited and even more surprised that he gave me a thumbs up. And I was very happy that the church understands that I'm a Christian artist and I'm not a blasphemous artist. I'm just an artist.
Well said, Serrano. I wonder what the scale is of things that the Pope can do or say that will make you feel good. Like thumbs up.
Thumbs up is pretty high up there.
Like compared to hug. Hug would be more.
High five?
High five? Better? I mean, high five involves contact, so that'd be pretty cool. But I don't know. I'm not Catholic. That guy is just another guy to me.
I mean, father, it's probably like whatever would make you feel like your estranged father accepts you and whatever makes you feel validated.
Any form of emotional intelligence. So I think this is all to say, like I've said before, I don't think these people are sincere in their outrage. I do not think that true people of faith have faith that is that fragile. And I do not think that they are sincerely angry so much as they are looking for something to be angry. And I think that's an important thing to remember throughout this entire episode. They do not actually care about art. They do not care about creativity. And just because their art history education starts and ends with Da Vinci and Starry Night does not mean that the rest of us have to.
It's not just this episode. There is this thread of media studies that runs through our interest in looking into these things. And it's such an important part of understanding anything in social media today and the way that it bleeds into other more traditional forms of media, which is so much of it is just driven by raw emotion.
Yep.
It's driven by outrage.
Yep.
It is not actually about anything meaningful. It is just what gets them clicks and views.
Yeah, and that is so important. Ginning up controversy and ginning up engagement on X, where a lot of people posted their outrage, and on Facebook and on TikTok. So, important to keep in mind. I am always a little bit concerned with feeding into the outrage cycle. I also
don't be outraged by the outrage.
Yeah. I'm not outraged. However, I do think these people are stupid. Nothing has changed.
Cynical or stupid?
I think they are cynical to a point where they have made themselves stupid.
And what's the difference?
Yeah. But I feel like it's a great opportunity to, introduce and discuss. Like, there's so much more to art history, Catholic art history and Greek art history than The Last Supper.
Doesn't end with Mike Johnson and Dan Brown.
Exactly. I hope that we can all walk away from this feeling a little bit smarter than Elon Musk, which is not that hard.
And that's it for this episode of Untitled Podcast with Art.
That's it. Exciting news. We are now on YouTube at Untitled Art Pod, where you can see a video version of this podcast featuring images of all of the art we talk about on this and other episodes. So don't forget to subscribe there, or on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/untitledartpod and find us online at untitledpod.art. Our music is by Layers and Layers.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, see you next time.
Bye.